Hey, Vsauce, Balatro GBA guy here. Have you ever wanted to make a game? That wasn't rhetorical. Anyway, I've been trying to make games for about 10 years now, and I don't really have anything to show for it. So, I'm trying again, I guess. But before that, I'd like to give a brief retrospective on some of the other projects I've made, so that you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. Wow. Mega Girl was a game that I made when I was like a fucking kid, and it's not good. I made it in Scratch, but it was the first big game I really tried to make, and the reason that it failed was because, for one, it was literally just a clone of Mega Man with recolored sprites, and two, I downloaded ransomware on my computer, and it deleted all the stuff. And you might be thinking that Scratch saves this stuff to the web, and it does, but I saved it locally because I thought I was too good for that, I guess. Bushworld was my first Unity game. I don't have any pictures of this or videos because they all got deleted. It was really bad. It was a platformer, and I tried to do a bunch of stuff that I didn't know how to do because I didn't know C#. So now this one's kind of complicated because it's not really a game exactly. It's a game engine, but not really, if that makes sense. I started working on this when I was 17 because I was under the impression that there's some sort of like elusive prestige to making a game engine yourself from scratch, and I still kind of believe that, but it just took forever to do anything on it, and it had a big structural problem where I kind of was building the game and the engine at the same time, and this was before I really understood any sort of structuring, so the game ended up becoming really hard to expand upon. This is something I actually do have videos on my channel though, so I don't really feel the need to talk about it that much.
Dude, perfect.
Basically, this game was just gonna be fucking Outer Wilds and Lethal Company before Repo came out, and Repo basically did all that. I got fed up with this because Unity's C# networking bullshit is really annoying. I was using Steam networking sockets or something, and I kept getting like a memory leak, and it made me really angry because the performance was terrible. I don't really like Unity now. And that brings us to where we are now. I'm really hoping that this time I'll actually be able to finish the fucking game. I plan to stick with it, so let's get on to that. Alright, the budget ran out. Time to go back to voiceovers. So to start things off, I needed to decide what I was going to use to make my game. I'd like to make it in my own engine, but then it would probably never come out. And as for game engines, I'm familiar with Unity, but honestly, if you saw that last part, I think I hate Unity now. It takes absolutely forever to boot up each time and has huge download sizes, and that's not even talking about their corporate decisions. So, following the trend of other previous Unity developers on YouTube, I decided to try out Godot, and holy shit, I understand the glaze for this engine now. It was a bit weird coming from Unity's entity component system to Godot's nodes, but I can say that after using Godot for a bit, the nodes are far more intuitive to me and feel much closer to object-oriented programming styles, which I prefer. And the best part, this thing is only 2 gigabytes and runs smoothly on literally anything. Okay, Godot glaze aside, I had my engine now, and I just need an idea. So I brought back my developer friend Cooper, who worked on Extraction Protocol, to help with this project. And we started trying to think of some ideas, and eventually settled upon making the core genre an FPS Roguelike. I realized that in this age, that's basically the most common indie game genre, but like, fuck you, it's my game. There are a lot of good roguelikes that I want to plagiarize, take inspiration from, and the biggest example of that would probably be Downwell. The basic concept for our game is that it would be very similar to Downwell, but instead of going down a well, you'd go forward in a hall, hence the ingenious title of our project, Forward Hall. I created a new Godot project and started trying to get a basic player controller set up. It started off as this weird springy thing where the camera would be dragged to the center of the player with elasticity. There was also a ball in the center of the player that was just for referencing the camera's movement. I don't really know why I did this. I just kind of wanted the player to have some impact when moving, I guess. After some fine tuning, I heavily toned down the elasticity of the player camera, leaving it only for when you initially land from a fall. I also made some Doom-like handgun sprites for the player with some TF2 beta inspired muzzle flashes. Now you could move and shoot, but there was still nothing to shoot at. I wanted to keep the same 2D and 3D sprite style I used on the gun for the enemies, but I'd need to draw the enemies from multiple angles, or else they just constantly face towards you. So I came up with the laziest design that would be the least tedious to draw, that being a floating eyeball. I opened my favorite free and open source image manipulation program, GIMP, and made these incredibly basic sprites for the eye. After following one of Miz's tutorials on Doom-style sprites, I was now able to display my little goober in-game. Although if you're going to make your own directional sprites, I'd recommend doing something like this instead of exactly how Miz's did it. This makes it so the angle of the sprite isn't based off the angle of the camera. Instead, it uses the camera's position relative to the sprite, which produces more accurate results in my opinion. If you heard me say all that and thought, what's the difference? I don't fucking know. So now the enemies were in game, but honestly, they kinda look like shit. My art skills aside, they just looked like they were superimposed into the scene without blending into the environment. I wanted the sprites to have a cel-shaded look, but with them being 2D, the lighting they received, unsurprisingly, had no depth. But shaders exist, so I got kind of obsessed and spent like an hour or two trying to give them a form of rim lighting. If you're a normie and you've only heard of shaders because of Minecraft, basically they're just programs that run on the GPU instead of the CPU for making graphics. I love shaders, and even though I probably did a terrible job, I'd like to think that this improved the sprite lighting a bit. I tried to base the shader on a technique animators use to quickly add lighting to characters. The shader takes the sprite and uses it as a mask for the light source, then it moves the mask a little bit away from the light source, which gives it a rim light that works on any shape. I gave the enemies a simple damaged effect and made it so the gun could actually shoot them. I also put the shader on the hand sprite too, so you could see the lighting effect in first person. It looked better than before, but honestly, I really wanted to keep working on the visual portion of the game, even if there was basically no gameplay. Adding polish is probably one of my favorite parts of game development because it's one of the things where you can really feel the difference. So I changed a lot of Godot's graphics settings and added some tracers to the gun, which made it feel a lot more satisfying to use. And yeah, these little things definitely make the game feel more fun to play and work on, even if they were only visual. And a neat little fact about the tracers is that they're also purely a visual effect. In most games, the bullet is actually just calculated instantly, like a laser, and the bullet tracer is just an animation that's played after the bullet hits. Unless you're Halo, I guess. Now there is one more feature I wanted to add to the core player kit before I worked on actual gameplay. I think most people would agree with me when I say that movement mechanics are fun. And one of my favorite mechanics is rocket jumping from TF2. I'm not good at it at all, but it makes traversal fun and has an incredibly high skill ceiling. I wanted to add something like that to my game, but just a little simpler so that traveling places isn't boring. So I added a kick, which functions as both a movement option and an attack. If you kick something, you get knocked back, and you can use that to gain a good amount of speed if you chain it together. Okay, now onto the actual gameplay. The enemies don't really do much since they have literally no AI, so I forced Cooper to breathe life into them, and he probably used ChatGPT or some shit to do it, I don't know. With the enemies having AI, I added the obligatory indie game pixel filter, and now the game was kind of gaming. Only problem is, it was still in that stupid gray checkerboard test map. But I honestly didn't really know what to make, so I just made a box with some platforms and free textures I found on itch.io. I made it using the Cyclops add-on for Godot, and honestly, I don't like Cyclops that much, but hey, it worked. Okay, so that level was actually shit. I tried a new add-on this time called Funk Godot, which is another level editor for Godot, except it uses Quake level files, which you make in an external program called Trench Broom. I like this tool a lot more, so I wanted to make something actually visually appealing. And like, I'm not Christian or anything, but cathedrals look cool, so I'll just make one of those. After like, I think a day, I had this map which looks vaguely like a cathedral. I don't really make maps, but you know, when you're a team of two, you don't really get to choose what you do and what you don't do. Perfection is the enemy of good enough, and I can always come back to do it later anyway. I redesigned the HUD from the simple green bar on the bottom left, and swapped it out with something that I based off the original Pokemon Sun and Moon health bars. The HUD was also rendered in 3D and sways with your view, which is a neat little detail I really like when games do. As you may have noticed, one of the HUD elements says dash, and yes, I added a dash because as stated earlier, movement tech is fun. The dash has a cooldown that refills both charges. If you use a charge before the other finishes regenerating, it resets the cooldown. I wanted the dash to be kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card ability. You can quickly move a large area, but then be vulnerable, or move a shorter distance but be able to dash again if needed. I spent a little more time tweaking smaller things like adding an edge highlighting shader from GodotShaders.com to the level geometry, and trying to improve the sky shader before getting completely sidetracked with something pointlessly difficult and unnecessary. So for context, I like Splatoon, and in around 2022, I decided to try making a clone of it in Roblox because I thought I could do it better than everyone else. Needless to say, I did not do better, but I kept working on it for almost 2 years until I was basically forced to stop because of some bullshit that happened internally because I let other people work on it. Anyway, the flame for that never truly died out, and I spent maybe 2 weeks trying to recreate Splatoon's ink system for my game. Now obviously, my game isn't about painting, so you might be wondering why I decided to do that. Well, to be honest, it was just because I could. I wanted to have blood for the enemies, but I didn't want to use decals, so I thought it would be more optimized to create an ink system so I could have loads of blood. And technically, it did end up performing better, just not on the CPU. The issue with the ink system, which I'm now going to refer to as the blood system, was that I needed a way to get the coordinates from 3D space to texture space whenever the blood hit the level. That alone wasn't the problem. Other game engines actually have native support for this feature, but the thing is, Godot doesn't. I ended up finding a resource online of someone who essentially recreated that 3D to texture space function, but it was made in GDScript. Now obviously GDScript is what Godot uses, but the problem is that it's slow. In something like Unity, that function is written natively in a low-level language like C++, which is then exposed as an engine function to be used in its high-level scripting language. Thankfully, Godot is open source, so I could just make a fork of the engine to include this feature myself, but I didn't want to do that because I like being able to have it on Steam and auto-update. So part of the reason that this took so long is because I was trying to optimize the GDScript function, which I get it, my bad, but I like using Steam, okay? That's the only reason I'm not using the .NET version of Godot. Anyway, I managed to improve the performance a lot by swapping out some of the functions that were implemented natively in the version of Godot that I was using. The main performance benefit I got was by caching the mesh data instead of recalculating it each time the function was used. So now when you go into a room, it stores all the geometry data in a lookup table, which then has the exact texture coordinates mapped to each triangle in the table. And since the blood system doesn't use decals, you can do some pretty fun stuff with it and suffer basically no performance loss. I added a simple blood dripping effect when a particle hits a wall or sloped surface, and that's just scratching the surface. You can paint the whole room and the performance will not change. I plan to do some more stuff with this in the future, but it's good enough and I should probably start working on the game again. Alright, so now that we're back on track, remember when I said my biggest inspiration for this game was Downwell? I lied. Pretty early on in development, Cooper and I realized that it wouldn't really make sense since the gameplay styles were just so different. What I really wanted was something like Enter the Gungeon, but in 3D. So now the game's just called Forward Hall for no reason, but whatever, I plan on changing the name anyway. With all that in mind, the biggest thing this game needed right now was level generation. I created 3 room variations in Trench Broom, each with 4 possible room connections. The way the generation works right now is really basic. When you first load into the game, it picks a random room with a random rotation and attaches it to the hallway at the end of the cathedral. Then it picks a random connection on that room and places another random room. It does this until there are 10 total rooms or an impossible level layout is made. It was at this point that we started running a few closed playtests, and one of the issues that was pointed out to us was that the enemies were difficult to see from above or below. Since the enemies were 2D, and we gave the player a lot of mobility, it was pretty easy to lose track of the enemies when in the air. So Cooper remade the eyeball in 3D, and I tried to make its lighting match the 2D one as closely as possible. Apparently this change was mildly controversial, so let me know which design you liked better. After that, I tried modeling a frog as another enemy for the game. I understand conceptually how to use Blender, but it's something I definitely need to get better at. I made some animations for the frog using blend shapes, except they were more like poses which would be swapped depending on the state of the enemy. Oh, and I also got a gay furry to voice the frogs, so that's cool. Now the last thing. You know this little water background that shows up when I'm too lazy to find relevant imagery for what I'm talking about? Obvious plot twist. That was from the game this whole time. I tried to make it look like the water from Super Mario Sunshine after reading this really interesting breakdown of how its water works. I wouldn't really say my implementation is faithful to the breakdown. I was just kind of having fun with it. I don't even know if our game is going to need water, but sometimes I just get carried away when writing shaders. They're just so fun to work on. And holy shit, I can finally stop editing this now. If you liked what you saw, we have a Stoat server in the description, because fuck Discord. If you want to support us, joining the server and doing playtests for us would be a huge help. Also, if the Steam page is up by the time I post this, wishlisting the game helps a ton, even if you don't plan on getting it. Anyway, that's going to be it for now. As always, I read every comment, even if I don't respond to it, and I'll leave you with some unedited footage of the game, with the music Jay's composed for it. Thanks for watching. Peace.